Hello, I'm Fred Dinenage and I'm talking television. Thank you so much for joining me. I was presenter of the ITV Regional News in the southeast and Thames Valley for maybe 30 years, and people often said to me, and still do you take the bad news home with you? Do certain stories stick in your mind? You can't forget them, particularly the bad news stories. And I suppose you're a bit like, if you're a TV presenter, you're a bit like a doctor or a nurse, and when you leave the studio, as they leave the hospital or whatever, you try and push the bad news out of your head and carry on with your life. But every now and then there's a story which sticks in your mind and you can't forget it. And there's one story that I've carried around with me for well over 20 years, and I still think about it even now. And that was the murder of a beautiful little girl called Sarah Payne in July 2000. I've always remembered it. I can't get it out of my mind, as I say, even now, because I was very closely involved in the ITV coverage of that particular murder. I got to know her parents, Sarah and Michael, incredibly well. I interviewed them several times, spent a lot of time with them. And also her grandparents, Terry and Leslie, because it was at their house that little Sarah was taken away and murdered. She was a beautiful little girl. She was 7 years of age. She lived at Hersham in Surrey. But at this time, she was at her grandparents' house, which is a place called Kingston Gorse, which is near Littlehampton in West Sussex, a very pleasant little spot. She was staying there with her grandparents, with her two older brothers and her younger sister. And they were playing a lot of the time in the fields at the back of the grandparents' house. And it was in one of those fields that the older brother felt he saw little Sarah getting or being dragged into a white van. And he rushed into the house to tell his grandparents, and they searched everywhere for her, couldn't find her. The police were called, and then began a long, long search for her. I became very involved in it. I was sent out to report and to talk to the parents and the grandparents, and we became very, very close indeed. And I followed the story, the search for little Sarah, when her body was eventually found, the search for the man who killed her, the arrest of the man who killed her, and then eventually the sentencing, the life sentence that he deservedly got for murdering a beautiful little girl. And as I say, we became incredibly close. She was eventually found in a field at Pulborough, some 15 miles away from where the grandparents lived. The police had already interviewed a guy called Roy Whiting in Littlehampton, just a few miles away, because Whiting was a convicted sex offender, and that's what the police will do in cases like this. They'll go to known sex offenders. And one of the policemen who interviewed him actually said at the time he was very suspicious of Whiting because he didn't seem to have any questions about the murder. He didn't seem to have any questions about Sarah or what might have happened. Almost as if he knew what had happened, and of course he did. And he was eventually convicted on forensic evidence because one of Sarah's hairs was found in his van. A couple of fibres from the van, from the carpet in the van, were found on Sarah's clothing. The police found a petrol receipt in the van from a garage very close to the spot where Sarah's body was found. And eventually Whiting, of course, was given a deserved life sentence. As I say, I got to know the grandparents, Terry and Leslie, incredibly well. The effect on them was, of course, catastrophic. They sold the house and moved away to the West Country, but ill health has unfortunately dogged them, particularly Terry. And I got to know Mum and Dad, as I said, Sarah and Michael, very well. It had a devastating effect on Michael, the little girl's father, who became an alcoholic, and the marriage broke up and he eventually died. Sarah, of course, formed something called Sarah's Law, which really did change the law. It gives parents access to a sex offenders register. So if you feel there's a sex offender living somewhere near where you live or where you're staying, you are able to access that information. It could be a lifesaver. And indeed, Sarah Payne reckons if that had existed at the time of Sarah's disappearance, her life may well have been saved. Again, life treated Sarah badly. I mean, she became an MBE because of her work with Sarah's Law, but then she was struck down by a terrible stroke. But she did make an amazing recovery from that. And we interviewed her again just a couple of years ago, and it was a very, very emotional meeting between her and I, because we got very, very close in the search in those early days for little Sarah Payne. So when people say, do you remember things? Do things have an impact on you? Yes. The murder of that little girl, Sarah Payne, is something I will never, ever forget. More television stories, happier stories, hopefully, next time. And thank you again for joining.